the schools. And Harold, you say that the breakdown, sorry, the something of common sense is the breach of common sense is the breach of school rules. So it is not only that which is coded. And here he says that honesty, justice, integrity, and responsibility form a moral philosophy which, associated with mutual interest among people, constitutes the foundation of ethics. And as engineering practitioners, we recognize the enormous responsibility placed on us in the development of our dear country. And today we'll be talking about our continent. We have a sacred responsibility towards society, and this is a charge we must keep. Any lack of ethical behavior on our part could have disastrous trust, safety, financial and economic implications for our dear country, and our professional reputation would thus be irredeemably damaged. It is in view of this that, as practitioners, we remind ourselves so often during our annual ethics and leadership lectures to chart a path of ethical behavior in all aspects of our dealings with the public, our colleagues, work, clients, etc. This year's lecture has been elevated to another level, where we are no more only thinking of Ghana, but the continent at large. We are pleased to have a seasoned, and as I mentioned, built environment professional, a highly regarded and illustrious legal brain in Ghana, and probably the Africa region, with a lot of experience in construction and commercial law. He is a leader, he is a writer, and a public speaker. And I guess I want to add that he's also a Pan-Africanist with a great sense of nationalism. I have listened to him many times on radio, and when he's discussing these issues of national importance, he discusses it dispassionately. I know that when he's properly introduced, you realize that we have made a good choice. With all of this, I still have to take a little bit slight at him because he's a lawyer. You see, after all of this, you remember, you say, but he was what? A leper. He is a lawyer. And with the happenings of today, today, because you are here, I will not say the things that I've been saying about lawyers. Because I always say that they are learned in the past. We are learning, and we are looking to the future. But I've had some private discussions with him, and he's told me that sometimes they pretend to know, and in doing so, they bring about confusion. And here I said that, but you have to be attentive. Because if you are not attentive, being a lawyer, he might confuse you with words. Because so far as lawyers are concerned, there are more than one interpretation of a word. And even expressions, whether it is now or even in the future. And I know you understand what I'm saying. With these few words, please, let us enjoy the lecture. Thank you very much. You are laughing so much.
Thank you very much, Engineer President. I was very happy that our speaker was laughing when you were talking. So since he was laughing, he will not hold you before the Supreme Court. So he's in our home, so you are safe. You are safe. So next on our agenda, we have to introduce a chairperson. I'm very happy I'm not the one introducing the chairperson, because the last time he joined us at one of our conferences and I was introducing him, he threatened to report me to my father. So we want to invite the executive director of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, in the person of Engineer David Kwetia Nyante, to introduce our chairman for today. Oh, let's put our hands together for our Executive Director.
Good evening, and you're all welcome to this event. I have tried to summarize the profile of our chairperson because that alone can take a long time. I wanted to read everything, but he kept saying, just summarize it. So I've summarized it as much as I can. President of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, Engineer Kwabena Bimpong. Chair Professional Practice and Ethics, and President-elect of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, Engineer Ludwig Anang Hesse. Council members, past presidents, Professor Engineer Douglas Boating, representatives of professional bodies, distinguished invited guests, fellow engineering practitioners, the media, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to this highly anticipated event. It's an honor to introduce our esteemed chairperson, whose professional practice and academic journey have been remarkable and extraordinary. We are here to explore the vital connections between ethics, engineering, law, and finance, with the goal of shaping a brighter future for our nation and the world. Steering us on this journey is Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boating, our chairperson. Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boating, a globally recognized cardiothoracic surgeon, has made significant contributions to healthcare, academia, and national development. After graduating from the University of Ghana Medical School in 1975, where he earned the prestigious Eastman Prize in Surgery, he pursued postgraduate studies at Hannover Medical University in Germany. There, he qualified as a general cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon and became a pioneer in heart transplantation. He performed his first heart transplant in 1985, becoming the first black surgeon globally to do so, and achieved the first heart-lung transplant in Hannover in 1988. Upon his return to Ghana in 1989, Professor Frimpong Boating established the National Cardiothoracic Center and the Ghana Heart Foundation, institutions that have been instrumental in advancing heart care in Ghana. His academic journey continued with his appointment as Associate Professor at the University of Ghana Medical School in 2000, followed by his promotion to full professor in 2002. His contributions to medicine have earned him honorary doctorates, including a Doctor of Science from the University of Education, Winneba, and a Doctor of Laws from the University of Ghana. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in addition to his surgical and academic contributions, Professor Frimpong Boating has held numerous influential positions, including CEO of Kolebu Teaching Hospital, President of the Ghana Red Cross Society, and Chairman of the Public Utility Regulatory Commission. He is a Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Ghana Medical Association, and the Ghana Surgical Society, and holds honorary membership in the German Surgical Society. Professor Frimpong Boating was Ghana's Minister for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation from 2017 to 2021. He also chaired the Presidential Committee on Vaccine Development and Production. His work in alternative energy, particularly in biodiesel and biogas research, aligns with his role as Secretary of the Center for Technology-Driven Economic Development, where he advocates for technology as a tool to bridge economic disparities. Professor Frimpong Boateng's extraordinary career has been recognized with several honors, including the Millennium Excellence Award, the Personality of the Decade Award, and the Companion of the Order of the Volta, 2006. He was also awarded the African Heroes Award by Ohio University in 2012. His legacy is further celebrated through his books, Deep Down My Heart and Taming a Monster, which details his experiences in cardiothoracic surgery and hospital management. Recently, a bust of Professor Frimpong Boateng was unveiled at the National Cardiothoracic Center in celebration of its 35th anniversary, symbolizing his enduring impact on medicine, technology, and national progress. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our chairperson, Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boateng. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Mr. President, I think you remember that I'm an ordinary fellow or ordinary member of the Ghana Institution of Engineers, but you didn't say it. So just remind you that I'm at home. Let me also remember my dear friend, Engineer Kwesi. When I was chairman of POIC, he was one of the formidable commissioners. Happy to see you again, Engineer Kwesi. I think you are in for a treat. So I will not say much. I'll reserve my comments for the end, and I'll come back again. Meanwhile, I'll call on Harold, Engineer Harold, to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. You know, the last time I was going to introduce him, I got into trouble. So you see, when you also introduced him, you got into trouble. You left the most important part out. But I had more interesting things I would have added, which are unofficial, you see. So those are the interesting ones. But I have to behave myself. So he's the chair, and I'm just over here today. And I think I would invite our Vice President to introduce the speaker for today. Engineers of Atijani, please, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I don't know why he does that, but anyways, I'm learning from him. Engineer President, permit me to stand on the protocols that you've already laid to introduce the speaker for today. Our speaker, Dr. David Ofosu-Dorte, is somebody I refer to as a coat of many colors. And those of you who have been listening to him, or if you've ever engaged him, you know why he's a coat of many colors. He has diverse experience, diverse backgrounds, and I'm not surprised he chose the topic that he chose. I asked him why the topic, and he says I should wait. He will tell us why he chose that topic. David Ofosu-Dorte is a founder and senior partner of AB and David Africa, a Pan-Africa business law firm with offices in multiple African countries. His experience cuts across diverse advisory roles relating to engineering and construction contracts, infrastructure deal structuring, public policy development, public-private partnerships, project finance and the power sector, He has been described as highly regarded, and he always brings innovation to issues due to his experience internationally. He was ranked #1 for projects and energy and has been notably involved in transactional mandates. And if he takes big money, then he must be rich as well. David's association with engineers has been for almost 3 decades, starting from his days as a transportation planner, where he worked with engineers on multidisciplinary assignments. After switching to law practice, he has continued to focus on engineering and construction projects, among others. And I have a tall list of projects that he has worked on, but permit me to just highlight a few relevant ones. They're all relevant, but the key ones. So in the area of dispute resolution, David was a lead counsel in the litigation of the most contentious dispute on fitness for purpose in engineering in respect of the West Africa gas pipeline, the case of Ballast Nidam Ghana BV versus Horizon Maritime Offshore. And those of you who would want to look up the case, is Supreme Court Civil Appeal number J4/18/2010. He also served as external counsel for Ghana in 4 ICC international arbitration cases, providing strategic counsel on disputes in engineering and construction sector. He was the mediator in major international disputes between Egyptian Ghana JV contractor and a multilateral institution based on UNCITRAL dispute model. He has also played many advisory roles. Again, let me highlight a few. So he was advisor on the 19-kilometer PPP concession, that's the Accra-Tema motorway project approved by Parliament in December 2023. He's also the external advisor to the project sponsor for the Lusaka, Chingola to Solwezi, I hope I got it correct, dual carriageway toll road project to link Zambia and Congo DR. So you see, he's not only, operating in Ghana, but he's also well sought after worldwide. He is also the advisor on the he was the advisor on the Qatar Sea Defense Project. He's also involved in policy and regulatory as well, and he has been providing advice in that area. He was actively involved in the drafting of the PPP bill, now Act 1039 for Ghana, the Town Planning Bill, now Act 925, an amendment to the revision of the Public Procurement Act, Act 663, the draft of Liberia Public Procurement Act, standard document and manual for the public procurement of the Republic of Liberia. And David, I hope you were not involved in the energy sector bills. That's... And he served as the embedded consultant, that is World Bank. He served as embedded consultant, which was a World Bank assignment, legal and claims specialist for Ministry of Roads and Highways from 1998 to 2001. I know for sure engineer Dr. Bequin was in school. In addition to law, he has a doctorate degree in business administration, a master's in public administration, master's in applied business research, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and a fellow of the Ghana Institute of Planners. And maybe we should consider making him an honorary fellow of Ghana Institute of Engineering as well. Yes, David lectures the law practice management course at the Ghana School of Law and the newly developed LLM in construction law at the Faculty of Law, Gimpa. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with a standing ovation and a resounding applause, help me welcome our speaker for today, Dr. David Gotter.
Oh, thank you. Please resume your seat. For the IT person, I hope it's on. Is it okay? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Dr. Professor Professor Frimpong Boateng, President of the Institution of Engineering, all dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to be invited to speak to you today on this topic of ethics. When Engineer Hesse called me, I was wondering why he was inviting me to speak to engineers on ethics. But he said it's the ethics lecture, annual ethics lecture, and I felt honored, and I decided to accept the invitation. The next question was, what was the topic I was supposed to speak on? And then he said I should choose a topic of my own. So I couched that topic, and I will explain shortly why I couched that topic. But having said that, I'm happy to see that no less a person than Prof is chairing the occasion today. He is the only politician I know who ever invited me to help serve on one of the boards that was under his ministry when he was a minister. And when he gave me the call, I had not met him before. Actually, it's the second time I'm meeting him. Yeah. I had not met him before, and he said somebody had mentioned my name. He thought that I could help him do the work. I had my doubts that I knew that probably my name, if it's presented and it got to the right place, it will be approved. But normally there are people who cross the names before it gets there. So thanks for the honor of being invited to serve, even though I never got to serve. The name never reached where it was supposed to reach. This is the second time I'm meeting Prof, and I feel honored that he will be chairing the occasion today. The other thing that is interesting is the number of people in the room who have been friends for a very long time, in many, many ways. Starting with Engineer Hesse. About 30 years ago, we all used to have our offices in Kaneshie. He was engineer at DUR, and I was an advisor to the AMA. And my office was across the big yard. And we used to meet very often, especially on Fridays. So we've come a very long way. That was before I moved to the legal profession, and I switched to the legal profession. But many people do not realize the correlation or the relationship between law and engineering. I haven't come to the topic yet. So permit me to just mention three. The first one is that in law, we don't use approximation. For us, everything must be definite. Engineers use approximation. Now, I'm talking about that because I need to draw the relationship for us to set everything in context. So for a lawyer, when the president makes remarks, I'm sure probably he was approximating about how what he said will affect him. If the IT person can, yes, okay, now we are on. Yeah. But in law, we don't use approximation. Everything must be definite and decided on. The second thing which is important in the relationship between law and engineering is the fact that in law, that which is obsolete is obsolete. You cannot use obsolete law. If it's repealed, it's repealed. End of the story. But in engineering, I believe you can still use Brunel design and design a bridge with Brunel characteristics to this day. After all, many of you have seen those buildings like the Supreme Court building with very, very big, thick walls. It was not because that was the way of structuring columns at that time, but it was because under the Planning Ordinance of 1904, the British wanted to sell their cement. That is the truth. And they made sure that we piled, I'll go back to the slides, don't worry. We piled a lot of cement in our columns and beams. Having said that, they also passed the mosquitoes ordinance, which explains, for example, why if you go to cantonments, certain buildings are designed with cantilevered beams so that the southwesterly winds would fly the mosquitoes to the boys' quarters for them to bite the indigents, in order that by the time they fly against the wind, they cannot bite the white man. This is how engineers applied engineering to apply obsolescence and design in order that malaria will stick to indigents during the colonial era. And it is backed by law. And I have just quoted the planning ordinance as well as the mosquito ordinance. You can refer to it. The last thing about the relationship between engineering and law is that with law, irrespective of uncertainty, there must be a decision. There are times when it comes to engineering, certain things are not certain. And because they are not certain, we leave it as it is. It doesn't matter whether there is so much uncertainty as to whether 137 minus 137 and 137, one is more than the other. There must be a decision when it comes to law. No pun intended. So when I was asked to give this talk, I decided that I will couch the topic that you see on the slides. You should be seeing that by now, which is redesigning Africa's transformation polygon, a convergence of ethics, engineering, and law. In my view, there are many professions who all play a role in the transformation that we seek. But I thought these three professions are the key ones to focus on for the purposes of this evening's lecture. And what do I mean by that? There is a burning desire all over Africa for the transformation of the continent. There's no doubt about that. We all know that. We talk about it on our various WhatsApp platforms, etc., and continuously accuse our politicians of their failure to recognize the need to transform the continent. Having said that, this is the one I'm using. The need to transform the continent. So that burning desire must be achieved in one way or the other. And the failure to achieve it is what leads to the high level of despondency, which leads to many people trying to leave the continent for what they consider as green pastures. As late as Saturday, somebody I know who was working in a bank, I found out that she was at the airport when she called me. What was the reason? She was going to do care in the UK. And I was wondering why. And she told me, but what is the hope in this country? And for engineers, lawyers, finance persons, and all other professionals, that's an indictment on us. It shows that we have not been able to build the hope that is desired by the youth. But if I were to cast my mind across, you will see that health professionals, for example, play a very fundamental role in what it is that we desire to achieve if we have to transform this country. So is agric, which is where we get our food, and so is education, where we get educated, and so is housing, where we stay. But each of these professions, in one way or the other, rely on engineering. And I will illustrate that using one African country's ecosystem shortly. And the key thing about engineering when it comes to its role is that one mistake can be very fatal, similar to a mistake if it's made by a doctor. If a doctor, for example, left a pair of scissors in the tummy after surgery, that is almost certainty when it comes to certain death when it comes to the life of the person. What if an engineer made a mistake? Like it happened in the Silver Bridge disaster in 1967 in the US, where failure to check the joints over a period of 40 years of the use of the bridge in the afternoon led to the collapse of the bridge linking West Virginia to Ohio. There were 37 cars on the bridge that evening. 34 of them went into the water and 46 people died. That is just one mistake or failure of routine and major maintenance. So the mistakes that an engineer may make or engineers make can lead to fatality. In law, such mistakes may not lead to such fatal results, but it's nevertheless important. I will talk about finance shortly. But the reason why mistakes in law is also key is that, as Robert Bolt put it, if society is the name we give to human behavior when it is patterned and orderly, then law is the very pattern of society. And society needs a pattern. And everything we do must be financed in one way or the other. And that is the reason I decided to focus on these three. Not because the other arms are not important, but because all of them hover in one way or the other around these three. And I will show the pervasiveness and ubiquitousness of these three very shortly, especially engineering. And I chose to double in the two words, ubiquitous and pervasive, even though both may often mean the same thing, but pervasive at times have a notorious meaning of something which spreads without it being welcome. So depending on the meaning you ascribe to it, I wanted to be fair to both words in terms of the nature of engineering, science, and law. Now let's take a look at this chart. And this is a case on the ecosystem of Egypt's economy. I chose to talk about Africa, and I chose Egypt for a reason. Recently, I had the privilege of leading an assignment covering 8 countries in Africa on how to engender an ecosystem of export trading companies in pursuit of the AFCFTA. And I thought Egypt was the most cooperative of all the countries. And it shows the extent to which Egyptian companies are taking advantage of the AFCFTA. So I chose their economy as an example. Now, if we were to take the pies in this chart and look at the real estate sector, that itself relies on engineering. Social services relies on engineering. Government services does. Agriculture in terms of irrigation, manufacturing in terms of plants and machinery, public facilities in terms of roads, electricity, water, etc. Construction itself, which is one of the areas we'll be focusing on, wholesale and retail facilities, communication in terms of towers that we will build, the development of the Suez Canal, which is a significant part of Egypt's economy. So a quick look at this shows that there is virtually no aspect of the economy you will look at that you will not find an engineer playing one role or the other. And there is none of these that you will not find a finance person providing some service in one form or the other, or law being put together in order to ensure that that sector functions. And it is for that reason that I focused on these three to see the interconnection and what we should do on a day dealing with ethics. So I've talked about the scope. But the scope itself leads to expansion in several areas. So for example, as the fight for independence continued in the 40s, it was very clear that the colonial government needed to do more in terms of development to satisfy the citizenry at that time. And in 1948, as an example, bauxite mining started in Ghana, in Awaso, with 50,000 metric tons being taken to Jamaica from that time up to now, which still continues up to this point. You may remember that 1922 to 1927, Governor Gagisbek had attempted to implement the Gagisbek Development Plan, the 7-year development plan, and that led to quite a lot of construction projects. It wasn't surprising that by 1951, the Kumasi College of Engineering had been established, which subsequently became KNUST in 1961 as a full-fledged university. I mention that because, as you notice, a lot of engineering courses we know in this country today stemmed from there, from civil engineering to structuring, now to computer engineering. And they have tried to update engineering courses in several ways, including petroleum engineering when we discovered oil. One of the challenges, of course, is our ability to continue expanding the economy in order to absorb the people that we churn out. It is much worse in law. There are law students today who graduate who find it difficult to find even pupillage. And I have met some engineering students in petroleum who don't have work. And I have met engineering students in aeronautical engineering who have not attended to anything aeronautical since they finished school. What it simply means is that we have not expanded the economy to be able to absorb them. And that's pathetic. That is not the fault of the schools producing engineers. It is the fault of those who manage the economy. However, there is always the need for industry and academia to work together. But having said that, you will also notice that during that period, by the time we got to 1959, Ghanaian professionals in engineering particularly had begun to set up practices. So the likes of Asafo Boakye and the rest, which started practice on their own, and I'll be returning to them shortly, including Mr. President, your own organization. I will touch on it shortly, and I have done my research in that regard. So both in academia and in practice, a lot of things happened over the period. And it's important that as we begin to look back, we look at these things and look at how we can help the transformation agenda, albeit doing that ethically. It is important to mention quite a number of projects which happened over the period, which in one way or the other led to the growth of the engineering profession and other professions. For example, in 1874, the first order in council for the development of a road in Ghana was passed, with the colonial government legislative council sitting in Sorbonne. I made a presentation on this many years ago when I addressed the Ghana Highway Authority on their 25th anniversary as to the history of procurement of roads in Ghana. Incidentally, this may surprise you that my great-grandfather happens to have been a foreman on that road which was established between Dodoa and Jamestown in order for the British to export palm fruits at that time. Dodoa to Accra Road, Jamestown was one of the earliest roads constructed in this country, pursuant to the order in council in 1874. Subsequently, other projects like the expansion of the then natural harbor in Takoradi and the development of Tema Harbor in the 60s, these led to the development of the material class of persons in the Ministry of Finance. Then the development of the motorway between 1960 and 1963. Then the Akoso Modam is held by Mpregilo. And the interesting thing about Akoso Modam was that even though there was a complete delay for 3 months during a period of flooding, unexpected flooding during that period, it was nevertheless completed 1 month ahead of schedule. These days, it is very difficult to find a construction project in Ghana being completed ahead of schedule. I happen to have been the lead person on the Millennium Challenge Compact 1, and we had to put in place a structure to enable us to complete that project within time. And the only reason we managed, or we put everything in place, was that the agreement, which is a public agreement, indicated that if we went beyond the period, then the money will not be spent. Ghana will have to find the money. So for the first time, we actually completed the project within the 5-year period on time and within budget. I will touch on this subject shortly as to the difference between treatment of projects in engineering in Ghana when it comes to the funding source. So having said that, with the rise of engineering profession also came the creation of certain agencies which made it possible for it to grow. AESL is an example. Now, AESL, the Architectural Engineering Services Limited, incidentally, and I may touch on this before I come to an end, was created about the same time Israel created Tahal Engineering. And I will show the correlation between the two shortly. I don't know the state of AESL the last time, as of today. I have not dealt with them since Sachimo was the CEO. So it's been a while. Now, VRA as an organization was put in place under the chairmanship of the president at that time, and Kwame Nkrumah chaired the board of VRA himself. Not only was it achieved in terms of being constructed on time, many do not realize that the VRA project was actually a PPP. Those days, it wasn't called PPP. It paid for itself in the sense that the water dam and Valco and the exports of Valco paid for itself. So was the motorway when it was told. It paid for itself. Yes, by the way, I had occasion to speak to Honorable Kwame Batel some time ago, and he told me a story about the days when Kwame Nkrumah sent his father to try and tax the people of Winneba or Apam rather. And the tax was to be imposed on the fisher folk. And the fisher folk asked his father, who I don't know his position at that time, but it was an interesting story. And they asked him that, isn't Kwame Nkrumah who did the motorway? He said yes. And that is why he told it. He said yes. Why is he trying to tax fishermen? Na Epo, Nkrumah na Oye. To it, is it Kwame Nkrumah who created the sea? So tolling has been around with us for a very long time. Even though we recently decided to cancel tolling for whatever reason, hopefully it's going to come back, as has been indicated. But having said that, not only AESL, but PWD was also an engineering institution, out of which the Ghana Highway Authority was created in 1974 under NRCD 328. Then you had the Ghana National Reconstruction Corps, subsequently becoming Ghana, the state construction company. Incidentally, all these state construction companies have been collapsed. Yet, many of the China construction companies, which led to a massive change in construction in Ghana, actually are government-owned. And it is strange that we killed our own, but hire those from China, which are state-owned, to actually carry out projects here. Ghana Railways and Ports is another entity which also led to the recruitment of engineers for mechanical engineering purposes and many others. These are but examples of some of the things that happened over the period that led to the growth of the profession. And anytime engineering profession grow, finance and law follow it. So when we talk of ethics, you will notice that I have not outlined ethics because ethics is not a profession. It is simply when any person apply ethical principles, including morality, accountability, integrity, and all those things which constitute various principles and values that we apply. So it is important that the Ghana Institution of, it is very good to know the Ghana Institution of Engineers has since, engineering has since 2015 instituted these lectures. And by my count, I'm supposed to be the 9th lecturer. I will be asking the institution, how come we haven't achieved some of the reasons why we sought to introduce this lecture, and whether we have an index for measuring whether the country has become more ethical or not. But having said that, it is still good for us to do this, because I am one of the people who believe that the worst thing the elite can do is to stop talking. It is important that we continue talking. I'm sure they hear. Now, I have illustrated a number of projects which happened in the past. But you will notice that during that period, many people behaved very ethically. Recently, Tony Otinjesi in the lecture at the University of Ghana talked about an attempt to bribe Kwame Nkrumah in the days during the construction of the Akosombo Dam and other things, where he caused an investigation into the attempted bribery and got people arrested and put in jail, and how subsequently the people who were put in jail were also released. Not under the Nkrumah regime, of course. As I was growing up, there was quite a lot of fear of God in us, and you go to church, and quite a lot of talk about heaven and the number of things we were to be afraid of and how to be a good neighbor and all that. Those days, there weren't that many churches. If you go to Jowulu, some of the churches there today used to be factories. Now, interestingly, it appears the more bishops and archbishops and general overseers we have, the more ethical issues we continue to have. We need to check why this has happened. In my view, we seem to have moved from the fear of God to the fear of the politician. This happened over time unnoticed. A few things are important to illustrate. I'm sure those in the road sector will remember 1993. And for me, it was the last time I saw real bold civil and public servants. That was when the head of state went on a tour of the motorway, which was receiving repairs at that time. And whoever whispered into his ears, he thought that the construction joints were not being done properly and castigated the engineers at that time. But obviously he was wrong. As we all know, he was no engineer. Now, he wasn't wrong because he was no engineer. He was wrong because he was wrong by engineering principles. Some bold civil servants organized a press conference to correct him and to put the record straight. Of course, the lives of Queno and August lost their jobs. In my view, that is when the fear of the politician perhaps began. Not to say that he had not existed before, because in the days of Kutu Achampo, especially the latter days, when Kalabule had gotten to its high point, nepotism and the proliferation of small contractors had risen so much, but it was more of issues of bribery that were talked about, whether people took 5% or 10%. But to cow civil servants to actually sacrifice or to attempt to get them to sacrifice engineering principles itself was quite a bold act at that time. Another case worth illustrating, and I'm sure Hesse will remember this because he was at Department of Urban Roads at that time. I keep a lot of these records, Hesse. I think Mr. Mono Youngson, who was the director, had just gone to Tanzania. And this was when the Kanda Highway was commissioned. If my memory serves me right, that must have been 95. The head of state at that time thought that there were too many street lights on the Kanda Highway because the commissioning was in the evening. As part of my transportation course, I had read highway lighting and knew that highway lighting is positioned at specific distances for specific purposes, because the human vision sees at a 66-degree cone, and the way you light the highway can cause accidents or prevent accidents from happening. But the head of state thought that if the people of Choco did not have lights, how come you have so many street lights on the Kanda Highway? And he ordered for them to be removed. Of course, the engineers knew he was wrong, but they removed each pole at an interval, creating patches of darkness. The first accident occurred that very day. They kept those street lights in one of the yards of the contractors. And I checked this evening on my way here. Those lights patches have still not been filled. We do not recognize it because the lights itself are not working. Like somebody said, there used to be light at the end of the tunnel, but that light itself has been turned off. On a more serious note, Mr. Chairman, you also had the issues where contractors like Abu took Ghana on for various reasons, and a lot of international contractors took Ghana on. When I was being introduced, they talked about the construction pioneer cases, for which I happened subsequently to become the lead counsel for the state for a 3-year period, until I handed over the file back to the state because it was very clear that they were not taking advice. And I am not breaching confidentiality. This is a matter in which I gave evidence in public to the Judgment Debt Commission. So if you read the Judgment Debt Commissioner's report, there are copious references to things which happened, which never ought to have happened in engineering in this country. Having said that, and having talked about the removal of Queno and August, interestingly, The successor CEO of Ghana Highway Authority, Bashir, was also removed when government changed. So the removal of CEOs is not as it were, is not done by only one government. It appears the fear of the politician has been instilled in civil servants gradually, and it's come to the point where civil servants fear to actually challenge politicians. I know the story of an engineer who realized that somebody had told the president at that time that a design of a certain intersection was a particular type of design, and I'm being conscious not to mention that particular intersection. And that design was wrong. But everybody was afraid to tell the president that the design was wrong. And because he had been told, we actually built that design to this day. Yes. That is how much we have put the fear of the politician into our civil servants and public servants. We did that also to contractors. And they became so much afraid that they decided to align themselves to political parties. And construction companies have risen and fallen according to who is in power. In 1999, I think about August, if my memory serves me right, I had a privilege to speak on public procurement at the IEA. And I made a statement which was published in the Daily Graphic. And the statement was to the fact that contractors are not selected according to political parties. And it was misinterpreted by many. And my point was that because every contractor I knew, and it is still mainly the case, claims to be aligned to the existing political party. If that is the case, then it means that there's a common denominator of being aligned to the political party. So whatever makes the choice must be something other than political allegiance. And that was the argument that I was making. Anyway, the chaos that resulted from some of these things I've talked about are so many that I cannot summarize them. Among other things, it led to the numerous judgment debts. In one of the cases of settling the judgment debt, the government's case was so bad that they decided that they would compensate the contractor with what was called the Cape Coast Town Roads. Somehow they forgot that in engineering, there is a need to define the scope of services. And because the scope was not defined, that contractor just went to Cape Coast and poured bitumen wherever it pleased. And Hesse knows what I'm talking about. And there are people here who know what I'm talking about. At rates it had determined. And that contractor was so close to a known high personality that you dare not challenge him. So the rates were brought, and then they were paid. Of course, subsequently, the issue of judgment debt came up because it had gotten to the point when a lot of people were afraid, and for many local contractors, it was also a take it or leave it situation. Then there were the cases of arranged marriages. You found situations where subcontractors in Ghana were actually compelled and imposed upon foreign contractors because the subcontractor was the one who had political links. And when that happens, and there is a government change, then a problem begins. I have said at several fora that I'm actually more scared about a ministerial change than I am about government change. Because I've observed that anytime minister changes within the same party, they cause more delay and more harm than when government changes. The reason is simple. Because when government changes, there is often pressure from the public for projects to continue. And it takes bold governments not to continue projects, especially when people need them. But for the minister, it is within the same party, and they find excuses. And many ministers delay projects of their very colleagues. Now, as a result, there are several projects which delay unnecessarily, and it is difficult for professionals to deal with it for several reasons. Now, these all culminate in a situation where it becomes very difficult to be ethical. And I will tell you one more story. This story is also a public story for which I happen to have been the lawyer who argued this matter all the way to the Supreme Court and got an award of a prolongation order for the main contractor, which lasted for a very long period. This is the World Trade Center building. Now, that building was originally designed to be completed in 3 years. It lasted 13 years. Including on one occasion, the government at that time appointing a home minister to be responsible for ensuring the building was completed. But it didn't happen. Because the subcontractor, or one of the subcontractors, was a nominated subcontractor. And in engineering, that means that that subcontractor was appointed technically by the employer. And this subcontractor took money and essentially blew it, so to speak. It was not applied to the works for which the subcontractor was to execute. We brought an application for prolongation. Essentially, the main contractor was idling as a result of the subcontractor's failure to proceed. There were a lot of political machinations in that, including a situation where one of the culprits was locked in cells, and a politician got the person removed from cells. And when the delegation went to the US with a view that they were going to renegotiate for the supplies, they met the person who was supposed to be in cells there. This is a strange country where we exercise power in many, many ways. The important thing, though, for you and I is that the prolongation cost us as taxpayers for 13 continuous years. Unfortunately, the building's original purpose was not achieved. And if you've been to that building lately, the less said about it, the better. Now, these things happen for several reasons, and I have mentioned the political ones. But the challenges that lead to persons being unethical are multiple. What if the challenge is that being ethical affects the bottom line, or it will affect the very existence of the organization? There are times professionals are confronted with that reality, and they need to make a decision whether to be ethical or not. And we, as professionals, must be mindful that we face this reality all times, and we must find ways of dealing with it and being ethical, no matter how hard it is. Now, as a result of that challenge, you have situations where there are a lot of corporate scandals because of failure to be ethical. The collapse of the banks between 2017 and 2019 in this country are examples. But prior to that, and I've had occasion to question this at a public lecture before, how come we didn't learn from the lessons of the collapse of banking, the Bank for Housing and Construction? We created a whole bank to promote this sector, and that bank itself, we allowed it to collapse. Now, these have massive impact on the engineering profession from various angles, and it's important that we are not only ethical as engineers, but encourage other professions to be ethical. Because if a banker is not ethical and it leads to the collapse, it affects the extent to which an engineer's project may be completed. And it's important we see it from that angle. Corporate scandals, irrespective of where you find it, will have one base or the other in some unethical practice. The recent example of 737 MAX of Boeing is a typical example where there's been media reports that it got to the point where Boeing appears to have been doing its own inspections. A lot have been said about this, and there have been suits in that regard. Recall by Toyota of things that they were supposed to have checked in their vehicles have led organizations like them in trouble. On the screen, you see the amount Volkswagen paid in its recent scandal when its emission levels were misreported. Quite a lot of fines, and these are things that could have been stopped if decision makers had decided to be ethical, even if it affected the bottom line. Because